We are happy to bring in John Alt, the father of Notre Dame signee Joe Alt in the 2021 class. I'd give you his height, weight, but every time I say it, every time I mention Joe Alt's name, he gains 5 pounds. So I'll let John discuss that here in a minute. But John, how you doing today, man?
Doing good. Doing good up here.
Well, really appreciate you joining us here. So, you have five children, a very athletic, highly competitive family. Do you ever think you'd have one of your kids end up, attending Notre Dame?
Well, not after I went to Iowa, I didn't, but prior to that, I was recruited by Notre Dame, and obviously we're Catholic and have a lot of respect for Notre Dame, so it wasn't out of the question. But after Iowa, I thought the odds were slim.
All right, so this is something I've asked you before, John, and in different articles at blueandgold.com. But let's talk about this for the podcast audience. When did you know that Joe is going to be an offensive tackle? Because he's played quarterback, I believe it was maybe eighth grade or freshman year. Also played linebacker, tight end as a sophomore or junior. So when did you kind of know he was going to be an offensive tackle?
Uh, well, I didn't let him know, but I knew very early, probably when he was 10 years old. He just had a different frame than my other son. I had him playing quarterback just to understand how the offensive scheme works, and I think it's a great asset to do that with a young kid to be able to see what's going on in the game. And he progressed from there, and as a ninth grader, played some linebacker, and he was about 6'2" at that time and about 210, and you could see him building and building and building, and then by his junior year, he really hit the growth spurt, kind of like I did, and took off. And I really like the idea of playing tight end because it gives you the opportunity to do a little bit of everything, and you still have to maintain your quickness and your athleticism. And I think it's a great transition to play in left tackle.
So, John, if I'm not mistaken, you were a tight end turned offensive lineman. That's right?
Yeah, I went in at about 235, and I was a tight end and played. Started in the Rose Bowl my sophomore year. I was 250 pounds when we showed up. By game day, I was 266, and Coach Fry said I've eaten my way out of the tight end position, and I need to consider making the move. And he talked me into it, and it was a good move, obviously, for me too.
So I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit more of, besides that initial funny story of, the Rose Bowl doing it, what really went into that switch, and as far as what goes into making it successfully and turning it into the pro career you did, and how does that kind of help you in Joe's development as he kind of makes that same transition here from playing tight end in high school to playing offensive line in college?
That's a great question. For me, it was a lot harder of a switch. I was resistant to making that transition. I think I was leaner going in, and I really didn't want to make the move. So I had a block there. But then I was, projected, and I wasn't even thinking about projecting myself into the NFL. I had no idea. But my chances would go dramatically up by playing left tackle than they would be at tight end. So I think that piece finally put me over the edge. I think Joe just saw the progression in himself that was going on naturally, and he made it. He's very methodical, and he knew that's where he was going to end up. I believe as of a junior year.
So speaking of junior year, I believe he played at about 230 pounds. And actually have a couple pictures here. So I'm not sure if this photo, and this is more for YouTube audience, so apologize for our podcast. But see the really skinny arms there, John. So I want to say maybe that was sophomore season. But then you have this photo. I mean, look at the difference. It's like Captain America pre-serum, and then Captain America once he gets the serum. It's like that's for podcast audience. That's what it looks like. Is that even the same person? So, I mean, how the heck was he able to put on so much weight in a short amount of time? And when I've talked to Joe, he says, he's maintained the same speed, which is kind of crazy when you think about, he's put on 50, 60 pounds.
Yeah, he just, I think, it happened to me a little bit later. I think it just happened with him a little bit earlier. He's up, he's over 300 pounds now, and like you said, his times are all still as good or better than they were prior. He's just been very dedicated, and came to me and asked me to help him get there. And I know how to put weight on as an offensive tackle, so I've given him the program that I've used, and it's very similar to what he uses. So that's been a good thing to see. And so we've kind of blended those, and it's just been a lot of natural and very, very hard work.
So the last time I spoke to him, which I believe was in February or March, he told me he was at 6'8", 290. Which I was like, man, how are you put on 60 pounds in a year? So now you're saying he's over 300 pounds.
He's a little over 6'7". He's about 6'7" and 3/8, but he's 304 yesterday, and it's not going to pump the brakes, but we're at that point with him now that he doesn't need to really gain a whole lot more going into June when he arrives.
So what's in that case more impressive? Him being able to put on that much in a year to where but 2 months before he enrolls, you're at the ideal weight, or whatever you had to do to get up to that 260 from 250 in the Rose Bowl. There, that seems like both a pretty good ability to put on when you have to.
Well, I didn't do it. I went from 260 to 280 by the start of my junior year, and that was not doing it the way he's doing. I lifted Nautilus. We were lifting Nautilus, so it wasn't the powerlifting program and the heavy weights that he's doing. So that helps. To be able to have that program and have a little different program. But I just think that he's been able to carry it and has not gone down in his athleticism. If anything, it's gotten better. And when you look at him as a sophomore, I was concerned because I think that's why he was kind of a late developer, and because he wasn't anything dramatically special to look at as a sophomore. But his ramp up has just been, dramatic.
So what does that process look like as far as you touched on the powerlifting, and I guess kind of take us inside a little bit of the specific workouts and things that he's done that have been able to add that mass and kind of keep the same times and speed and agility that he has.
Yeah, it's like it's an equal blend of on the field work as it is in the weight room, and depending on the weights that we're doing, he will he'll either do the agility and speed first, or in a leg case, he'll do that after his leg workout. But every day, its primary focus is one muscle group, and then so Monday is a bench day. Then Thursday it's a bench, but it's a light bench with a lot of fast twitch muscles using medicine balls, all kinds of different bench movements, chest movements, but not the heavy lifting things that we do on Monday. In the case of legs, it's on Tuesday, and then we'll do a cycle of that for 4 weeks or so, and then we'll do a break-up push-pull routine, and then and that's machines and stuff like that just to shock the muscles. And then we go back to it and we cycle back down 8, 6, the reps go back down. And it's just something that I've used over my career, and it worked. I could get to the point where I could weigh exactly 311 pounds if I wanted to. And that's what I wanted.
So to shift it to recruiting for a minute, what was the Notre Dame staff like in the recruiting process, and kind of how that all came together, especially considering Iowa's in the mix and you played there, and their offensive line pedigree of developing guys, and then Minnesota in there too as the school that's close to home.
Yeah, Minnesota, Iowa, they were in early, and Iowa State was in even earlier, and they wanted them as a tight end. And so there was 8 or 9 schools that were interested. But Notre Dame, I think, was more advanced in their way to handle the non-traditional recruiting process. Jeff Boyan did a great job with how he presented it initially. They came on with a full court press early in, I think, May, and prior to that they had made contact, but it wasn't anything serious. So but in May, it was just, I always told my kids, if somebody wants you and you can feel that they really want you and have a need for you, that's the primary. I don't care what school it is, that's where you got focus your interest. And it just became very clear that that was Notre Dame, answered all the bells for Joe. And it wasn't about my alma mater or anything like that. And, you know, it wasn't about it with Mark. He played hockey at Minnesota. So, I mean, I let my kids make their decision for them. And it was obvious to him. I think that after what they did with the recruiting and Coach Quinn and Coach Kelly, it was just a good fit.
So in going back to kind of your career, and how many guys from who you overlapped with, or just got to know and playing for 13 years in the pros, have been kind of mentors to Joe, or just kind of helped him as he's gone on in his development as an offensive tackle? I know you played with Tim Grunhard on the Chiefs, the former Notre Dame offensive lineman whose son played for Notre Dame too. I'm curious if he in particular has been someone who's been kind of a resource for Joe.
Tim was an absolute support for Joe, and Tim made it clear that he was a big fan of Notre Dame while we were at Kansas City, and you know we all had our locker room teams that we loved, but he was very passionate about Notre Dame, so that was great. Tim's been a great friend of mine, you know, through the years when he was at Kansas City, and we were at the Super Bowl together with his son and my son, and Joe had a lot of questions for him, and he just helped him in a lot of ways, in the real down to earth ways that Tim answers questions. Much of the people that Joe talked to early on were quarterbacks, Rich Gannon, Steve DeBerg, guys I played with that could give him advice on football while he was playing quarterback. And I think, like I said earlier, that helps with the overall concept of the game. And for me, I was like that too, because I would study what the strong safety's doing, because I knew if that, what he was doing would impact the end. So the more you know about the defense, it's going to help you as an offensive lineman anticipate what the defense is going to do. So they helped quite a bit with that. I think recognizing secondary and stuff like that will ultimately help you play offensive line.
So that kind of leads me back to something earlier. You mentioned how Joe just kind of knew he wanted to be a lineman, even though he played quarterback and was, like you just mentioned there, asked questions of QBs and had played tight end in Iowa State, had wanted him at tight end. What about tackle do you think he liked? And even in that, do you kind of see some of yourself in him and how you played?
Yeah, I think especially at left tackle, you're really on an island. You're in your own world. A lot of times it's one-on-one game, and it's something you can control. And it's not as much of like quarterback. You got to control a lot of things, and you got to answer to a lot of people. Defensively, I mean, I don't think he loved defense as a young kid. He could just run around, but I don't think he was a defensive player at heart. So I think that the offensive linemen have a mind, and if you look at defensive backs, they kind of have a mindset. Offensive linemen, very similar personalities and stuff like that. He fits that category. I mean, he really fits an offensive lineman profile.
Well, John, that's all we had for you. I mean, this podcast and YouTube show, we say this is a pro Joe Alt YouTube and podcast channel. I don't know if you know this, John, but Joe has a fan club. I am the president of it. If you want in as the VP, I can talk to my people and see if we can make that happen.
That's awesome. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, that's John Alt. Appreciate you coming on, John.
Thank you, guys.